Hi, this is the fourth video in a series of videos detailing the story of my expulsion from Columbia University for false accusations of the repeated rapes of my best friend and first love. The explanation is being done in sequence, so if you haven't watched the previous videos, you may be a bit lost. I left off right when I was told for the first time what the complainant truly believed. I remember that day like it was yesterday, me crying so loudly that I'm sure anyone outside would have been able to hear me, telling the investigators that there has to be some sort of mistake, that the complainant would never, ever say these things about me. She'd never do something like this. But as they assured me that the accusations were legitimate, they kept telling me that I need to get an attorney advisor to advise me on what to do. Furthermore, they informed me that I was suspended from the campus effective immediately. At first, this was insulting because I knew that I hadn't done anything like this at all. I knew that the complainant wasn't well, but I knew that they also had to do their jobs. I told myself that this must have been standard procedure when it came to accusations of this enormity, so I just figured that the more I cooperate, the faster this process will go, and the faster they can clear me, and the faster we can help the complainant, because I thought that was the end goal. I thought that was the common end goal. My mind was absolute mush from everything that was going on, but there was one thing that was so crystal clear to me at this point. I had been an utter fool. Everything started to make so much sense now. The complainant's wild oscillations in her attitude about sex with me throughout the years. The fact that she told me never to talk to her friends about it. The fact she told me even never to talk about it. Why she never told me what she thought I did to her. Her constantly invoking those ridiculous definitions of sexual assault that I gave her to empower her. Whenever she'd do something that was erratic or nonsensical with her demands towards me, her telling me how much she loved me when I follow her bizarre demands without question, and all of her anger towards me whenever I point out legitimate inconsistencies in her behavior. All of those psychotropic drugs. Why my friends on campus were treating me like a pariah, like a monster. Her words. I fought back so much. You show me how much you love me by respecting my wishes. This whole time, all these years, my best friend somehow, through her psychosis, managed to manufacture, with the help of a bad therapist, memories of me mercilessly abusing her. She was sick. Whatever psychosis she had guided all of her behaviors to maintain it. She would reinforce my overly submissive behavior with her love and then punish any opposition to her behavior with reprimand. She made sure that I kept quiet about her psychotic predilections so that she would make sure that no one else would ever question them, because she knew that I was the only one stupid enough to do everything that she said and believe everything that she said without fail. All the while, her therapist was ingraining the idea that all of her pain could be explained away if she just believed that Dexter was the problem. It, right on a campus where it was easier than ever to call yourself a victim and gain unconditional, unwavering, unquestioning support from everyone around you, including me, who was idiotic enough at every step of the way to give her whatever she wanted. We were all fools. Me, Janice Doe, Jane Doe, John Doe, for blindly entertaining this woman's delusions when we should have been helping her. The difference between me and them, though, is that I didn't know what she believed. No one told me what she believed. I could have saved her. Well, I like to think that I could have saved her. I could have pointed her in the right direction while her mind was still fighting this. Do you remember that text she sent me on February 25th? Like, she would tell me that she knew that none of this could have been real because she loved me so much, or that she thought that that might have been true. She was fighting it. I could have gotten her away from that therapist. I could have gotten to her family and told them what was happening. We could have stopped all of this from happening. But on that campus, blind belief prevails. Victimhood prevails, especially for women. I tried so hard to understand. We were all just trying to do what we thought was the right thing. The complainant legitimately believes that she's a victim and she suffered like she was a victim. We were just trying to help women stand firmly against sexual violence. But how many times did my friends personally witness the love between us? It, it was tangible, unmistakably. How many times did I show that love to them? How many times did I bend over backwards for them? For how could they have thought that I would do something like this? In my junior year, Jane Doe personally heard the complainant tell her that I am gentle in bed. And then a year later, Jane Doe somehow believes that I've been raping the complainant throughout her entire college career based off of a completely random accusation, and all of a sudden it makes sense? Okay, there couldn't have been a morsel of logic in any of the processing of this story. They spoke right to their emotions. I I confronted Jane Doe, I'm sorry, not Jane Doe, Janice Doe about this first. The one that I had sent to talk to the complainants about her issues, the one who kept telling me that it was my fault. She was the only person that the investigators told me that I could talk to before they kicked me off of the campus. I thought that she would be quick to help me after she realized how terrible what she had done was, how the whole time I was telling her that something was wrong with the complainant and that she kept insisting that I was the problem, and that I was right and that she was wrong. Well, that's what I realized anyway. There's no way that she'd knowingly act against the best interests of someone that she claims that she considers a brother, right? And that she's as close to as any of her boyfriends ever were, right? The problem with me is that I never take into account the power of the human ego. When it became clear that for 3 months Janice Doe's intervention had actually been in no small part what was worsening the complainant's condition the whole time, Janice Doe went into denial immediately. She started saying that she didn't believe either of us now because she wasn't in the room, even though she was just telling me how much I had to accept the fact that everything was my fault and how she would have killed me if she were in the complainant's shoes, since she was the one who vehemently urged the complainant to report me. And now that she realized how wrong she was, she couldn't go backwards. All of our texts are in the description, but just know that ultimately she ran away from me to avoid facing her guilt and testified against me to protect her ego. To her credit, she did apologize for all that she had done 6 months later, but not before me cursing her out and letting her know that she is the worst kind of person. There is nothing worse than someone who betrays their friends. Meanwhile, I was at my home in Long Island since I had been kicked off the campus, and every one of my friends expressed the same sentiments. They loathed the complainant no matter how much I tried to explain to them that she was ill and therefore not in control of her actions, and they also bemoaned how much of a doormat I was to everyone. Don't get me wrong, my home friends' support is the reason that I'm alive today to tell you this story, because I was perilously close to suicide after this. But they weren't above denigrating me on a daily for even trusting an Asian woman when I'm a black male, because they kept saying that a black male in those kinds of groups would be the first to be scapegoated always. I wanted to oppose them because I wanted to think that love would just beat anything. But even I knew that on some level, on some small level, they were right. A muscular black man and a frail Asian woman. All of those implicit biases must have guided this dive into irrationality within my friends, because there's no other way that they could see that I loved this woman endlessly and then come to this conclusion based on logic. Must have completely bypassed the prefrontal cortex and went right to the limbic system, because they spoke right to her emotions. It's incredible. And regarding the way I treat the women, especially considering how I treat them all the time, if you didn't think I heard all these I told you so's when I was at home with my friends, my real friends anyway, you're sorely mistaken. They and my family reminded me at every turn that all of my coddling behavior towards these women were the cause of all of this, and that I never should have trusted them. In case any of you thought that victim blaming was only done to victims of sexual assault. And when I told them that I confessed to molesting the complainant, all to protect her from having to deal with any emotional pain and to try to make her well again, can you imagine how many times I was called a little bitch back home? They were being very coarse, of course. And they were just trying to tell me in their own way that I let my emotions control me too much. And this is completely true. I loved people who clearly did not give a damn about me, and the only person who did give a damn about me on that entire campus had lost her mind, partially because of my displays of love for her and my intense desire to protect her. This whole situation threw my entire worldview and my entire psyche into utter disarray. My depression was already horrible when I was on the campus, but after all this happened, I was at the edge so many times. Where you just don't care anymore about what happens to you or to anyone, where you know that if you just died and all of the pain stops, you don't have to ask yourself anymore how people could do this to each other, how people who said that they loved you could do this to you. How anything like this could be happening, how my best friend could be suffering at this very moment because she believed that I was her rapist. But there was one thing that did give me hope, and that was the case itself. At first, I analyzed this and I was like, okay, these accusations are so incredibly outlandish. Years and places that we've never even been sexual. On top of that, Janice Doe told me that she already told the Office of Gender-Based Misconduct about her drug abuse problems. There was some amount of relief that came after these accusations had first surfaced on top of this. I finally knew that it wasn't me. None of the complainant's pain was actually my fault, no matter how much you and everyone else wanted to convince me that it was. All I had to do was cooperate with the Office of Gender-Based Misconduct to help them to understand the situation. I just had to explain to them that this was a huge misunderstanding, my confession included. Then we could work together towards finding evidence to clear me, and the faster that's out of the way, the faster we can get to proving that the complainant is very sick to her and her family, and we can work on getting the help that she needs. I was naive enough to believe at every step of this that that was the goal. I made the mistake of taking an attorney who worked with the university because his services were free of charge. I certainly didn't have the funds to hire my own attorney, especially in light of the fact that this situation manifested so suddenly. The first thing he did, of course, was ensure me that all was going to be well and that he'd take care of me. After I explained what happened, well, the first thing he did was advise me to remove the word molestation from my vocabulary. The second was to tell me that we couldn't submit any evidence, that I couldn't even talk to the people at Columbia to defend myself. I wrote my personal statement, which has been now converted into my appeal, and a timeline for the Office of Gender-Based Misconduct. That's all in the description. You can see it in the notes. I wanted to cooperate with them in any way I could. I wanted to use my materials to help the complainant. If they could show her any of what I wrote and then use it to find the surveillance footage of any of these events, I could prove my innocence and show that the complainant that she's sick. But my lawyer said over and over again that they weren't going to use cameras. Practically each time I spoke to him, I begged him to ask the university to find camera evidence, and every time there was a new excuse. This isn't that kind of case. The standard of proof is so low in this case. I even asked my case manager, Robert Ferrigolo, for it as well. I didn't understand at the time why on earth those weren't the first sources of evidence that they looked towards. When that meets even the lowest standard of proof, camera evidence of me not doing anything suspicious or terrible or monstrous to my friend, in places where she says that I am doing vicious, terrible, monstrous things to her. The complainant said that these attacks were happening all over the place as recently as the previous semester. All we had to do is get one date, one place, Moreover, when the investigators did their job and contacted me, they let me know that they wanted an interview with me after an entire month of me waiting in agony and silence, uh, trying to beg my lawyer to ask for camera evidence, while he just dismisses that suggestion and tells me that he's negotiating. Guess what my lawyer told me when he was notified about this meeting with the investigators that I was supposed to do after a month? He was like, yeah, no interview. That he's working with the higher ups on my behalf as it is, and they're still negotiating. So I kept waiting and waiting every day. Okay, after 2 months into this process, that's only supposed to take about that long, I'm informed that they met with the complainant again and that she gave them absolutely gruesome accounts of how I restrained her, forced myself on her, and in her and all this while she was screaming for me to stop. Apparently, she believed that I was brutally raping her in the Dodge music rooms, especially because and those rooms were soundproofed. And she claims that she was screaming, but that nobody could hear her because of the soundproofing. Okay, that's convenient as heck. There were cameras in the Dodge Music Hall for sure. I've been there so many times with her. We practiced music there a lot. We have even been sexual there, but very, very consensually. I actually distinctly remember once distinctly asking her permission to be sexual with her, because that was the beginning of our, what was it, fall of 2013 semester. I wasn't completely comfortable with her yet. These allegations were absolutely ridiculous, and I just wanted a chance to prove my innocence. But my lawyers started telling me, especially after the second meeting with the complainant, that the university was prepared to expel me, that they feel like they're giving me the world by even letting me have my degree, that even my friends testified against me, saying that he's always been a touchy, grabby person. Naturally, I reacted by asking how on earth anyone could believe that what she was saying was true. How could my own friends believe? Is this how they made that leap in logic of me brutally raping my best friend, who has so many times told them that I'm the best thing ever to her? The fact that I hug and kiss all of my friends alike, that I'm affectionate to them, male and female alike? I've never exceeded somebody's boundaries, and if I did apologize. Months prior to this, I was so sure that these people loved me, and all it took was one accusation to completely change their outlook on me, so much so that they were willing to speak against me. I had to give them the benefit of the doubt, though. They didn't know that I was innocent. They were just blindly believing and trying to defend their friend who was legitimately suffering. Please keep that in mind. Her pain was real. If not her memories, if not the events anyway. I can't blame them, but I can blame the university, because they saw the huge disparity in my narrative, which I told before the complainant's narrative. They saw the disparity between the two. They can't be reconciled at all. Janice Doe told me that she told the investigators about the drug problems. Everyone knew about her drug problems. I'm sitting here begging for camera evidence. I wanted to submit any evidence I could, talk to anyone I could. Why on earth would they not believe anything that I'm saying? My lawyer began to invoke my confession now. He was like, the confession that I explained, by the way, a dozen times over, was the product of years of confusion and done out of a completely selfless attempt to protect this woman. I told him so many times already that I've never done anything to this woman and nothing to harm her. I've never touched her after she's ever communicated to me in any way, in body language or otherwise, that she didn't want me to, but that I was trying to protect her and empower her when I told her that, and I was just trying to be a good feminist. I told him over and over again, and he saw the timeline, like I said in the description. He knew how back and forth it was. He knew what she was doing was absolutely ridiculous. and that everything that I did was completely innocuous, things that would never hurt another girl who wasn't psychotic. He said that he admitted to himself how much he can see how much I love this woman. And this is important, guys. I want you to pay attention right here. He started listing the affirmative action rules, the new ones that were just implemented into Colombia's gender-based misconduct response. He said that you admitted to touching her without her consent. So you did do something. So they can expel you for that. And I just go on and start talking to him about how that's absolutely ludicrous, that they must know that this woman is mentally ill. And I've told him so many times that she was vacillating like crazy, no pun intended, between wanting to touch me and not wanting me to even so much as see her change. I touched her in the same way that I always do to start any sexual contact with her, just like any girlfriend or boyfriend ever does, just like I've done with any of my girlfriends, and they've never complained against me. But one day she would want it to just turn into sexual activity, and the other day she would tell me that I'm disrespecting her and molesting her. Okay, after citing all of the other rules that I was already aware of, he just went on to say, it doesn't matter that you were in a relationship. It doesn't matter that you touched her, that you got her consent 1,000 times. If you touched her even one time without her consent, that's non-consensual sexual contact, that's sexual assault, and they can expel you for that. After I do everything I can to explain why that's asinine, and I couldn't believe he even asked me this. Listen, he asked, well, why were you with this girl if you knew that she was like this? I mean, it's a good question, but it just goes to show that victim blaming is not only like something that's done to rape victims, you guys. I didn't understand. I didn't understand why my own lawyer was trying to convince me that I deserved what was happening to me after he seemed so sympathetic at first after talking to me. I didn't understand how he could have been in direct contact with the university for months and they didn't believe anything that I was saying. I went into Robert Ferriolo's office on May 18th, 2 weeks after the case began, against legal advice to stay away and just let my lawyer handle everything, to retract my confession. I told him that I used the word molestation out of confusion, that I've never done anything to hurt this woman. But I thought that I did because everything that I was doing was creating such adverse reactions to her. Even my slightest touch, I would genuinely thought that I hurt her, and there was nothing else to go on. I didn't account for confabulations. It was that same day, May 18th. I think that was the same day I asked him for camera evidence as well, by the way. Okay. No matter how much I told my lawyer all these facts, all of the ways by which he and the Office of Gender-Based Misconduct could corroborate that I am telling the truth, he still said that the university wanted to expel me. He said that they never believed my explanation because hold on, these were the exact words he used. I'm going to give you his exact words. You're a smart Columbia boy. Do you think that they're going to believe that you didn't know what molestation means? But molestation's a violent word. I was so confident that if I just explained myself, they'd understand. But he just kept telling me that it was impossible. Over and over and over again, he just kept reminding me that your own word is what's damaging you. So I wanted to go to a hearing. That way I could finally speak my piece and get whoever my lawyer was speaking to understand what was going on, because the only way that they would do this or even consider expelling me for this is if they just didn't understand that was happening and they were swayed completely by the complainant's emotional account, right? Or maybe they were just being as illogical as my friends were, right? But over and over and over again, my lawyer told me that I would fail in a hearing. He said that these processes were so brief and that he has so much experience in them that there's no way I'd be able to explain myself in the small amount of time that they would give me. Why they wouldn't give me more time to explain, I don't know. But moreover, he told me that I'm not in the right mental state to give testimony. I mean, he wasn't wrong about that one. But I was willing to go for it anyway. But over and over again, trust me, repeatedly, every time I call him, I cannot possibly see you succeeding in a hearing. If you lose, they'll take everything away from you. You'll lose your degree and everything. I thought that the entire reason that he was there was to make sure that none of that would happen. I know I should have expected foul play, you guys. I should admit that I am gullible and pathetic, but I was in such a weak mental state. All I wanted was for this case to end and for me to be cleared so I could go to the complainant and talk some sense into her. So when the lawyer called me and said that the Columbia people had finally reached a solution, I thought I'd be happy until I heard what it was. He told me that they were not going to expel me and that they're going to let me keep my degree, but that I be a persona non grata on Columbia property, and for those of you who don't know, a persona non grata means an unwelcome person in Latin, and it basically means that if I step onto any of their property, I'm considered a trespasser and they can arrest me on sight. That's what it says. They put a mark on my transcript saying that I was sanctioned and that I couldn't attend any Columbia graduate programs, the medical schools included, of course. And of course, I did start crying because this means that I was still going to be punished for something that I didn't do, and I don't know why my lawyer was assuring me that this was good news. Basically, they told me that it was either I go to a hearing and I try to explain everything and fail and lose everything, or I sign a respondent response form saying that at this time I do not deny responsibility for I do not admit or deny responsibility for these charges and do not wish to proceed to a hearing panel. Therefore, I understand that this matter will proceed directly to the sanctions phase. Why didn't any bells go off in my head when my lawyer started saying, now listen, when you get these sanctions, when you get the sanction paper, there's going to be some harsh language in there, so I just don't want you to get too upset, okay? I didn't even care about that. The first thing that I intended to do after this case was over was go straight to the complainant. For 4 months, the university ordered me not to contact her or any of my friends in order to protect the integrity of the investigation, which is ironic considering that their investigation and everything about them was done entirely without integrity, but I digress. My lawyer also told me that if I did contact her or any of the witnesses, that they take my degree away immediately. So if nothing else, it was clear that no one else had told her that her memories are false, apparently, if she still believes all this. If I could just get her to see somehow that she could stop suffering, she could tell the university that she made a mistake eventually, maybe years from now, and we could all put this horrible affair behind her. All we have to do is somehow explain this to her and make this seem real to her and show her. But the university imposed a no contact order with the sanctions. On top of this, my lawyer lied to me, surprise, surprise, about not expelling me. Remember, he said that was one of the conditions, but he apparently only did this to pacify me. You can read in the documents in the description that I was clearly expelled. My sanction letter clearly states that it's going to be on my record that I was expelled. But that wasn't the most insulting part. It was the last line that Dean Crom wrote on the page. That's what hurt more than anything. What did it say? Oh, I have it here. I hope that through this process you have taken time to reflect upon the harm that your actions has caused the complainant. This is a serious matter, and the decision to impose these sanctions is a result of your failure to abide by the expectations for student conduct and the community standards at Columbia University. I could not believe that she really wrote that to me. She really said that my actions are what harmed the complainant. They really believe this? With every single step of this, I've been trying to show them that the entire reason that all of this is happening is because I was trying so hard to abide by the expectations for student conduct and the community standards at Columbia University. I nearly died trying to protect them, trying to uphold them. How many times I nearly killed myself, blaming myself when I transgressed them to the tiniest degree. even though they are ridiculous. And they really wrote this to me. I vowed to show them that they had me pegged wrong, that somehow, some way, they made a mistake, and that if they truly believe that I hurt this woman, then they are clearly just operating on emotion. I signed this document confident that I could appeal later. The RRF, the response form, I signed it thinking that eventually I'll just appeal when I have more evidence. And apparently, all of my attempts to get evidence during the process wasn't enough. Apparently, me begging for camera evidence wasn't enough. And my lawyer said that we couldn't submit any of the materials because they are dangerous and could be used against me in a criminal trial. All of the documents I prepared and all of the text messages, he just said over and over again, were too risky. All those ones that you see down there in the description. I was too naive to see that this was all just a cover-up. The entire time, the university knew that I had never done anything to harm this woman in my life. They knew that she was mentally ill. At every step, they were just trying to silence me and make sure that the complainant and her parents were assuaged, even if it ended up making her condition worse. That's why they had to expel me with such harsh language. That's why my lawyer lied about me not being expelled before I signed the form. That's why the university never sought any of the evidence that I asked for. That's why the evidence, the complainant's mental health was severely compromised, was ignored. That's why I was never allowed to speak to defend myself. That's why my lawyer, who was working directly with the university, was trying to convince me that I did something to harm my friend. That's why he was working so hard to dissuade me from going to a hearing. This had to remain as one-sided as possible, because any opposition to the complainant could result in her and her parents' dissatisfaction and thus image universities for the image issues for the university. It's much easier to condemn a black man than it is to condemn an Asian woman. That's what this entire process was about, but I was none the wiser. But I didn't think that anyone could do something so elaborate and horrible. My attorney, they legitimately put logical thought, months of logical thought, into ways that would harm both me and the complainant to protect themselves. Okay, I will say this at least. My attorney advisor may have been on my side though, if in an unethical way. I don't think he's a bad person. I don't think he's like those Columbia bureaucrats. I think that he knew how naive I was, how loving I was towards this woman, and how trusting I was of him and everyone else around me. I think he knew that the university had absolutely no intention to do what was right, and that he was negotiating for all those months to do everything that he could to make sure that they didn't drop the maximum penalty on me, and in order to pacify the complainant's parents. He stayed on the phone with me for hours and talked with the Columbia people for on my behalf long after he was paid for the case. I think that he just couldn't bear to tell me about how corrupt Columbia's system was because I was so damn naive. It would also mean admitting to himself that he receives a paycheck from this very corrupt institution. So it was easier for him to somehow convince me that what was happening was because of me, if he was going to help me in the only way that he knew how. And that's just to do his best just to navigate this really, really corrupt system of lies and malevolence. I'm sure that he would never have predicted that I'd be more than willing to stand up to all those lies and malevolence, I'd be willing to destroy my own reputation for the right thing. So he lied to me in order to bring me to the conclusion that things were just better that way, submitting to Columbia's lies, because he was afraid that if I opposed this, that even if I was innocent, there was still a chance that my life would be ruined. I think he did the wrong thing with good intentions. I don't think that my attorney is like Jerry Henry or Kristen Crom or any of those other bureaucrats that had a hand in this. I don't think he's heartless. I just think I just trusted all of them because it's the right thing to do, to always trust in the good in people before you believe in the bad in people. But it became too clear that after I submitted my appeal that these people were corrupt and that I had been a complete idiot to trust them. I can prove it. I hope you'll watch the fifth and final video in this series to find out how. Oh my gosh, this long-winded anecdote is over, at least the fourth part of it. Thank you so much for joining me and staying with me, guys. I swear we're almost done. Last stretch. Thank you. I'll see you next video.